to Lex Reads. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about historical fiction books. As you guys know, that has become one of my favorite genres. For the past, I would say 2 going on 3 years, I always include several in my reading, and I discovered that that is, like I said, one of my favorite genres. And I want to mention some of my favorites and then some new ones that I did read this year. So let's just get started. So let's do new ones that I have read this year. So first is Carolina Built by Yana Alexander. This was our Unsung Book Club pick for the month of, was it July, I want to say. I really did enjoy this. I would say the only thing that kind of was, I don't want to say a letdown, but I kind of wish it was a little bit more off to the book. It was kind of flat, but overall it still was a good story. Y'all know I always say I like that drama and tea, so of course I want a little bit of, the parts that had that tea, of course, I loved it. But this actually is about a woman named Josephine Leary. She was a Black woman post Civil War. She owned land, and she was Black, and she was a woman, and she did it on her own, which she signed deeds, she had property. And if you go to, I believe it's in North Carolina, you still can see one of her buildings. She put like her initials, so you still can see it. One of her lands was like a parking lot. Another one was a storage unit. Also, her and her husband, they owned a barber shop. This woman was phenomenal. The fact that not a lot of people know about her. That's one reason why I was so glad that this was our pick, because we learned about a new Black person that's contributed to society, but it's not really well known. And the fact, again, I always go back to, this was a Black woman that owned property. That was like unheard of, and she was able to do it. Next, this would be considered a historical romance / YA, and it did not read like YA. You guys know I always say I have my, ifs about YA, but it was The Davenport by Crystal Marcus. When I tell you I'm so excited for the next book to come out in November, I will be getting it on the day. I think it's the is it the 11th or 12th, I believe. I think it's the 11th of November. I will be getting it. And yeah, this was on my TBR for this year. I would say my favorite, I like Helen. My favorite is Helen. And of course, Amy Rose, the maid, you want her to win because of her situation. Again, so excited for this. I adore this cover. This cover is just so pretty. Next is American Daughters by Parker Hughley. And this was one of my anticipated reads for this year. And I really enjoyed this because it talked about the friendship of Portia Washington and Alice Roosevelt. Alice was the daughter of President Roosevelt, and Portia was the daughter of Booker T. Washington. And I had no idea that they were friends, and they kept up with each other. I love the fact that it was like 2 stories in one, because you got each one's perspective, and then it would come together at the end. Also, I learned a lot about Alice. I did not know that Alice Roosevelt, she was a bit of a rebel. Her husband is not her child's father. She was almost banished from the White House. They said she would do practical jokes. She smoked on the roof of the house. Yeah, she was something. Her and her siblings, they tore that White House up, they said. And then with Portia, one thing I found really intriguing is, with Booker T. Washington's stand, he was about, finding a trade, not about like a cultural aspect of like knowing arts and history and, all of that, like a cultural aspect, like W. Du Bois. But his daughter was a pianist, and she went to, was it Germany? I know she went overseas to like do to be a pianist, and she has a degree in that. So when I was reading it, I was like, that's really interesting, because again, he didn't really find that necessary. And of course, finding out the historical aspects, of him being president, and Booker T. Washington, he really did get a lot of input from him. Next is 50 Words for Rain by Asha Lemme. And this is a debut novel of this author. I became aware of her after one of my favorite authors, which I'm going to talk about next, Sadiko Johnson. She did like an Amazon short this year of like a character from one of her historical fiction books. And there was like a series of historical fiction writers, and she was on that list. And I started to look her up because, of course, when I saw that she was Black, I'm like, okay, never heard of her. And this is talking about, it's post World War II in Japan. And the main protagonist, she is biracial. Her mother is Japanese, and her father was a Black. Was he? I don't think he was a soldier. Oh, I forgot how the mom met. But of course, she became ostracized from the family because, I mean, you got a Black daughter. One day she just drops her daughter off to her family and disappears. And her family is a well to do, like high elite family in Japan. And they basically keep her a secret, where they keep her down in like the attic, and the grandmother treats her just so badly. But then she finds out that she has a half brother, and he adores her, and you see how it goes. It was really, really good. I honestly enjoyed this. So that is it for all of the historical fiction books that I read this year. Now, for the three books are kind of like my top, I would say, first of all, I've read them several times. One and two of them is by like my favorite authors of all time. So yeah, the first one is, which is my favorite book of all times, and again, my favorite author of all times. It is Bernice L. McFadden, Praise Song for the Butterflies. I have a video of me reading this book in one day. I'll put it down below. This, hands down. Book just does something to me. And every time I read it, I get a different perspective, and I feel like I've read it for the first time. This book is also very special to me because this was how I was able to get into African literature, because this book is set in a fictional African village called Ukimbi, and you have a young girl. Her name is Obeah. Kata, and so far, her growing up, very privileged, very well taken care of, and everything. But then things start happening to the family, financially, some personal. And there's something in, I believe, Uganda, and it still goes on to this day, where it's called the Chukwazi system, and they have something called a shrine. And a shrine is basically, it's slavery. It's like a kind of like a plantation, basically, like their version. And you have something in their culture where it's called religious servitude, where you pick a family member and they pay for your sins. And the sins can be something as, fornication, adultery, lying, theft, anything. And they believe that if a family member pays for your sins, that your life will become better, you will be prosperous, and all of that. So, because their family's going through hard times, they pick Obeah. And she is in that shrine for 15 years. But she is able to get out. And when I first read this book, I listened to it on audio, and Robin Miles, hands down, one of my favorite narrators. And you guys know Bernice L. McFadden, works and books and sentences are just brilliant. No one can write like Bernice L. McFadden, in my opinion. I love all of her books. I've read all of her books, and she's an author where she can tell a well-rounded story in little pages. This book is not long. This book is 244 pages. I read this in one day. So, and I read slowly. Not like anything I've ever read. And the fact that you learn about something that is real. And like I said, this still goes on till today. And it's supposed to be banished and illegal, but it still goes on. In the video that I did of me reading this book, I include clips of Bernice McFadden talking about the book, I believe, but I also include real life girls from the Chukwazi system, they're called Chukwazi, talking about their lives in the shrine. And you have one that, she talks about her life and then how she was able to, come out of it. When I tell you this is a gem, love it so much. Next is Breath, Eyes, Memory by Edwidge Danticat. This is a debut novel by Edwidge Danticat. She is a Haitian writer. She was one of my author picks about 2 years ago, where I would read, 3 authors' whole fictional catalog, and I read all of hers and amazed. But with this one, you have a young girl. She is from Haiti. She's living with her grandmother. But her mother decides that she wants her to, move with her, live with her in the States, in New York. and she does, but she doesn't really know a lot about her mother and her mother's past. And they have something in the Haitian culture where they test the girls to see if they are virgins. And yeah, but when you read her mother's story, that story, that mother still gets to me till today. I read this book years ago, okay? Don't expect what happens to happen. She throws you a curveball. And then you also see the young girl as like a kid, and you see her as an adult, her married and everything. Y'all, please read this. Please read this. And then lastly, I'm always going to include, every time I talk about historical fiction book, I'm always going to include this book because, oh, yeah. Let me just show you guys. I know you guys probably already guessed it. Yellow Wife by Sidney Johnson. I mean, hands down. I love this book so much that I have 3 copies of this book. And for a book to be one of my favorites, I also have to read it multiple times because I don't read books multiple times. It's like once I read it, I'm done. You know what I mean? I want to read something else. I feel like, okay, you already read it. Why are you reading it again? But for this, I'm surprised I haven't read this book this year. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, I might pick this up. I don't, girl, I still got books on my TBR list I need to read, but yeah. She's also another writer where when she comes up with something, I'm getting it. Yeah, this, hands down, this and this are my 2 favorite historical fiction books of all time. Also, they're my 2 favorite books of all time. That's how deep these books are for me. So yeah. So yeah, guys, that is it when it comes to my historical fiction books. Again, some of my favorite ones and some that I just read this year. I actually picked up another historical fiction book. I got this book, The House of Doors. I think Tan Twang Ing, I believe. I'm probably saying it wrong. But this is about, it's set in 1920s, and it's actually based on a real life writer named Willie Somerset McCam, I believe that's how you say his name. He was a real writer, and I know he struggled with homosexuality. Of course, during that time he couldn't come out. That's like the historical aspects you're going to learn about him. And of course, there's going to be some fictional aspects of he's like looking to write a new novel, and he ends up visiting like some friends, but he also brings like his friend. And yeah, so I really want to get into this because this was the only one that really did intrigue me out of that whole list. Yeah, this will probably be my next historical fiction book. So yeah, guys, that's all I have for you, and I'll be back with more Black books. Bye.